The Duke didn't realize he had destroyed his marriage when he crossed the ballroom. He didn't realize it when he offered another woman his hand. He didn't realize it when his wife quietly lowered her eyes and stepped away. He realized it 3 days later, when her wardrobe was empty, her wedding ring sat on his desk, and nobody knew where she had gone. By then, it was already too late. The orchestra played on as Duke Sebastian Blackwood walked past his wife without saying a word. Duchess Evelyn Blackwood stood beside one of the towering marble columns of the Winter Ball and watched him move through the crowd. For a brief moment, she thought he was coming toward her. It was a foolish thought, one she should have stopped having years ago. Sebastian walked right past her, his attention fixed on someone else. Evelyn followed his gaze and immediately saw Lady Arabella Ashcroft standing near the center of the ballroom. Beautiful, elegant, effortlessly charming. The woman everyone had once expected Sebastian to marry. Arabella smiled the moment she saw him approaching. And then something happened that Evelyn wished she had not seen. Sebastian smiled back. It wasn't a large smile. Most people probably wouldn't have noticed it. But Evelyn did, because she had spent 5 years searching for smiles that never came. 5 years hoping for warmth. 5 years hoping one day her husband would look at her the way he looked at everyone else, especially Arabella. The orchestra shifted into a waltz. Noble couples moved toward the dance floor. Evelyn felt her heart beat a little faster. Every year at the Winter Ball, husbands traditionally shared the first dance with their wives. Every year she hoped. Every year she was disappointed. This year would be no different. Sebastian stopped in front of Arabella and extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Arabella smiled warmly. "Of course, Your Grace." The words struck Evelyn harder than she expected. Around her, whispers immediately began. Quiet, subtle, cruel. There they are. They always looked better together. Such a shame he married the wrong woman. Evelyn lowered her eyes. She had heard those whispers for years. Tonight they somehow hurt more. Perhaps because a small part of her had hoped things might finally be changing. She had spent nearly a month planning this evening, choosing her gown, arranging the guest list, overseeing every detail of the event herself. Not because Sebastian asked her to, because she wanted him to be proud of her. Foolish, the word echoed through her mind. On the dance floor, Sebastian and Arabella moved effortlessly together. They looked comfortable, familiar, like two people who understood one another without trying. Several guests openly watched them. Some smiled. Others exchanged knowing looks. Evelyn felt invisible. "Your Grace," a voice said softly beside her. She turned to find an elderly countess offering a sympathetic smile. Sympathy. Somehow that was worse than mockery. "Are you quite all right?" the woman asked. Evelyn forced a smile. "Of course." The countess clearly didn't believe her. Neither did Evelyn. Across the ballroom, Sebastian laughed at something Arabella said. The sound froze her completely. She couldn't remember the last time she had heard him laugh around her. Perhaps she never had. The realization settled heavily in her chest. 5 years. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of trying. 5 years of hoping. And she could not remember her husband ever laughing with her. The orchestra continued playing. Couples twirled beneath crystal chandeliers. The ballroom glowed with golden light. Yet Evelyn suddenly felt very cold. "You should sit down, Your Grace," the countess suggested gently. Evelyn nodded. Anything to escape the dance floor. Anything to stop watching. She moved toward a quieter section of the ballroom near the terrace doors. Fresh winter air drifted inside each time a servant opened them. It helped. Slightly. From there she could still see Sebastian and Arabella dancing. But now she could pretend she wasn't watching. She almost succeeded. Then she saw Arabella place her hand lightly on Sebastian's arm as they spoke. The gesture was innocent, harmless, yet it felt strangely intimate. The kind of familiarity Evelyn had never shared with her own husband. Suddenly, she didn't want to be inside the ballroom anymore. She stepped onto the terrace. Snow covered the palace gardens beyond. The moonlight reflected across frozen fountains and neatly trimmed hedges. For several moments she stood alone, breathing slowly, trying not to cry, trying not to feel like a fool. The terrace doors opened behind her. Voices drifted outside. Male voices. Evelyn wasn't trying to listen. Then she heard Sebastian's name. Instinctively she froze. "You know," one nobleman said with a chuckle, "everyone thought Sebastian would marry Arabella." Laughter followed. Another voice answered, "Most of us still think he should have." More laughter. Evelyn stared at the snow-covered gardens. Her fingers tightened around the terrace railing. Then came the voice she knew better than any other. Sebastian's, calm, deep, unreadable. "That was a long time ago." One of the men laughed again. "Still, you can't tell me you never wondered what life would have been like if you'd chosen differently." Silence followed. Just a few seconds, but long enough for hope to die. Evelyn waited for him to defend her, waited for him to say he loved his wife, waited for him to dismiss the conversation entirely. Instead, Sebastian said quietly, "Perhaps." The single word shattered something inside her, not because it was cruel, because it was honest. The men continued talking. Evelyn heard none of it. Her ears rang, her chest felt hollow. 5 years. 5 years of loyalty. 5 years of standing beside him. 5 years of loving a man who had never truly chosen her. And now she finally understood something she should have understood long ago. She wasn't waiting for him to love her. She was waiting for him to notice her. The realization hurt more than anything that had happened in the ballroom. More than the whispers, more than the sympathy, more than the dance. Slowly, Evelyn stepped away from the terrace doors. Nobody noticed. Nobody called her name. Nobody stopped her. She walked back through the ballroom one final time. Past the chandeliers, past the musicians, past the couples dancing beneath the golden light. Her eyes found Sebastian across the room. He was still speaking with Arabella, still smiling, still completely unaware that his marriage was breaking apart only a few feet away. Evelyn looked at him for several seconds. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. And for the first time in 5 years, she stopped hoping. For the first time in 5 years, Evelyn stopped hoping. The realization followed her all the way home. The carriage ride back to Blackwood Estate was silent. Snow drifted past the windows while the wheels rolled steadily through the frozen countryside. Across from her, Sebastian reviewed several documents beneath the glow of a carriage lantern. He never looked up. Never noticed the tears she spent half the journey trying to hide. Never noticed that something inside her had finally broken. 5 years ago, that would have hurt. Tonight it simply felt familiar. When the carriage arrived at the estate, Sebastian stepped out first. A footman opened Evelyn's door moments later. "Your Grace." She nodded and entered the mansion. The entrance hall was warm. The servants greeted them. Everything looked exactly as it had yesterday, yet somehow nothing felt the same. "Good night," Sebastian said. Evelyn turned. For a moment she wondered if he would say something more. Ask if she enjoyed the evening. Tell her she looked beautiful. Notice she had barely spoken since leaving the palace. Instead, he added, "I have correspondence to finish." Then he walked away, just like that. Evelyn watched him disappear up the staircase. Then she laughed quietly. Not because anything was funny, because she finally understood how ridiculous she had been. 5 years. 5 years waiting for moments that never came. 5 years believing that if she loved him enough, eventually he would love her back. 5 years building excuses for a man who never asked for them. Slowly she climbed the stairs to her room. Her room, not theirs. The separate bedrooms had begun on their wedding night. The memory arrived immediately. She had been 23. Nervous, hopeful, terrified. The entire kingdom had celebrated their marriage. People called them the perfect match, the future Duke and Duchess of Blackwood. That night she sat alone in her new bedroom, waiting for her husband. Eventually, Sebastian arrived. Not with affection, not with excitement, not even with discomfort. Simply duty. He stood near the fireplace and said words she would never forget. "You will always be treated with respect." Evelyn remembered smiling, waiting for the rest. It never came. "I hope we can build a peaceful life together." That was all. No kiss, no tenderness, no promises, just politeness. At the time, she convinced herself it was enough. Love could come later, couldn't it? The silence felt overwhelming. Across the hall, Sebastian's study remained lit. He was probably working already, the same way he worked every night, the same way he worked on anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, every moment she secretly wished he would spend with her. Evelyn removed her earrings and stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked tired, not physically, emotionally. She looked like someone who had spent years waiting at a locked door. Another memory surfaced, their first anniversary. She had planned everything herself. A private dinner, candles, his favorite wine, fresh flowers. She spent hours preparing. Then she waited, and waited, and waited. Midnight arrived before a servant finally delivered a message. His Grace had been delayed by business. He would not be attending. No apology, no explanation, just absence. The next morning, Sebastian acted as though nothing unusual had happened, and she allowed it, because she loved him. The memory made her smile sadly. How many times had she forgiven things he never apologized for? Too many. Evelyn moved toward the window. Snow continued falling outside. The estate looked beautiful beneath moonlight. She remembered another winter, 3 years ago. A terrible fever had kept her confined to bed for nearly a week. The physician visited daily. Servants attended her constantly. Everyone seemed concerned, everyone except Sebastian. He sent medicine, he sent instructions, he sent flowers. But he never came himself, not once, not even for 5 minutes, not even to ask how she felt. She remembered lying awake one night listening to the wind and wondering whether her husband would notice if she died. The answer frightened her, because she genuinely didn't know. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Graves entered carrying tea. The elderly housekeeper smiled warmly. "You should get some rest, Your Grace." Evelyn accepted the cup. "Thank you." Mrs. Graves hesitated, then softly asked, "Are you all right?" The question nearly broke her, because unlike Sebastian, Mrs. Graves had noticed. Everyone noticed. Everyone except him. "I'm fine," Evelyn lied. The older woman clearly didn't believe her, but she nodded anyway and quietly left. Once the door closed, Evelyn sat beside the fire. The estate had always loved her. The servants, the gardeners, the staff. Over the years she learned their names, remembered their birthdays, helped pay for weddings, funded medical treatments, taught children to read. She had poured herself into everyone around her, everyone except the one person she truly wanted. Then remembered the worst conversation of all. It happened 6 months earlier, one rainy evening. She and Sebastian had been sitting in the library, neither speaking. The silence between them had become normal. Eventually, she asked a question she spent years avoiding. "Have you ever regretted marrying me?" Sebastian looked up from his book. The question clearly surprised him. For several moments he considered it. Then he answered, Regret serves no purpose. That was it. Not yes. Not no. Just another carefully constructed wall. Another way to avoid honesty. Another way to avoid her. At the time, she told herself his answer wasn't cruel. Now she wasn't so sure. Evelyn stared into the fire. Suddenly she felt exhausted. Not tired. Finished. 5 years of trying. 5 years of hoping. 5 years of loving someone who never truly let her close. And tonight, standing outside those terrace doors, she had finally heard the truth. Perhaps he would have been happier with Arabella. Perhaps he had wondered what life might have been like. Perhaps she had spent half a decade fighting for a place in a man's heart that was never hers to win. The realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. Not happiness. Acceptance. Slowly, Evelyn stood, walked toward her writing desk, and sat down. For several minutes, she simply stared at the blank paper. Then she picked up her pen. Outside, snow continued falling across Blackwood Estate. Inside, for the first time in 5 years, Duchess Evelyn Blackwood began writing the letter that would change everything. And upstairs, Duke Sebastian Blackwood continued working in his study completely, unaware that by the time he realized what he had lost, she would already be gone. 3 days later, Duke Sebastian Blackwood opened his wife's bedroom door and immediately knew something was wrong. The room was spotless, too spotless. The fireplace had gone cold. Fresh flowers no longer sat beside the window. The book Evelyn had been reading was gone from the bedside table. For several seconds he simply stood there staring. Then his eyes moved toward the wardrobe. Empty. Every dress, every coat, every personal belonging. Gone. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Unfamiliar. Uncomfortable. "Your Grace?" a servant asked from behind him. Sebastian didn't look away from the wardrobe. "Where is the Duchess?" Silence followed, long enough to make him turn around. The servant looked nervous. "We thought she informed you." Sebastian's stomach tightened slightly. "Informed me of what?" "The Duchess left 3 days ago." The words made no sense. Left? Left for where? The servant lowered his eyes. "Nobody knows." For the first time, genuine alarm flashed across Sebastian's face. Minutes later, he stood inside his study staring at the letter resting upon his desk. Beside it sat Evelyn's wedding ring. The sight alone felt wrong. Sebastian picked up the letter. His hands remained steady. His heartbeat did not. He unfolded the paper slowly. Evelyn's handwriting stared back at him. Beautiful, elegant, familiar. "Sebastian, 5 years ago I married a man I loved. I believed that if I was patient enough, kind enough, loyal enough, one day he might love me too. This is not a letter of anger. It is not a letter of blame. It is simply the truth. I am tired, tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of standing beside someone who never truly chose me. The winter ball finally helped me understand what I should have understood years ago. You do not owe me love, but I owe myself peace. By the time you read this, I will be gone. Please do not look for me. I hope one day you find the happiness that always seemed to exist everywhere except beside me. Goodbye, Evelyn." Sebastian finished reading and stared at the page, then read it again, then a third time. The words refused to settle properly inside his mind. Gone. The Duchess had left. His wife had left. For 5 years, Evelyn had been a constant presence in his life. Quiet, reliable, unshakable. She was simply there. And now, she wasn't. Sebastian looked toward the wedding ring. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. The day he placed that ring upon her finger. She had smiled at him as though he had given her the entire world. He remembered thinking she looked happy. He also remembered feeling nothing. At least that was what he told himself. The following week proved strangely difficult. Sebastian expected Evelyn to return. Every morning he assumed she would walk through the front doors. Every evening he expected to hear her voice somewhere in the house. She never came back. The estate felt different, quieter, colder, empty. Sebastian found himself noticing things he had never noticed before. The fresh flowers throughout the mansion disappeared. The music room remained silent. The servants smiled less. Even dinner felt strange. One evening, he sat alone at the massive dining table. Halfway through the meal, he realized something. For 5 years, Evelyn had always asked how his day went. He had rarely answered with more than a sentence. Yet the silence now felt unbearable. Days became weeks. The discomfort refused to leave. One afternoon, Mrs. Graves entered his study carrying estate records. Before leaving, she hesitated. "Your Grace?" Sebastian looked up. "Yes?" The older woman seemed uncertain whether she should continue. Finally, she did. "The orphanage in town requires funding again." Sebastian frowned. "I already approved funding last year." Mrs. Graves blinked. "No, Your Grace. The Duchess did." Sebastian stared at her. "What?" "She paid for it herself." Silence. Mrs. Graves continued. "And the school?" Sebastian's expression hardened slightly. "What school?" "The one in Westbridge." More silence. "The clinic, too." Sebastian slowly lowered his pen. "The clinic?" Mrs. Graves nodded. "The Duchess funded medical treatment for dozens of families over the years." Sebastian said nothing, because he genuinely hadn't known. After she left, he sat alone for nearly an hour. Then he started asking questions. The answers only made things worse. Evelyn had paid for schools, hospitals, orphanages, scholarships, widows, veterans. Entire communities knew her name. Entire communities loved her. Somehow she had spent years quietly changing lives without ever seeking recognition, and he had never noticed. One evening, Sebastian entered the library searching for a document. Instead, he discovered a small wooden box tucked behind several books. Curious, he opened it. Letters, dozens of them. Everyone written by Evelyn, everyone addressed to him, none delivered. His stomach tightened. He unfolded the first letter. "Today you smiled when your horse finally recovered from its injury. It lasted only a second, but I spent the rest of the day smiling too." Sebastian froze. He opened another. "You looked exhausted tonight. I wanted to tell you to rest, but I wasn't sure if you would welcome the concern." Another. "Today marks 3 years since our wedding. I know anniversaries aren't important to you, but they're important to me." Another. "Sometimes I wonder if loving you quietly is easier than hearing the truth out loud." Sebastian stopped reading. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm, too difficult to breathe inside. For the first time in years, guilt hit him. Not mild regret, not discomfort. Guilt. Real, crushing guilt. Because Evelyn had loved him. Completely, deeply, faithfully, and he had given her almost nothing in return. The next morning, a messenger arrived from the capital. The young man looked exhausted from travel. "Your Grace." Sebastian immediately sensed something important. "What is it?" The messenger handed over a document. Sebastian opened it. His face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" "Port authorities, Your Grace." Sebastian read the document again, then again. No, Evelyn wasn't simply traveling. She wasn't visiting relatives. She wasn't taking time away. She was leaving the kingdom. Permanently. Her passage had already been booked aboard a ship departing in 2 days. Suddenly, every excuse vanished. Every assumption disappeared. She wasn't coming back. This was goodbye. Real goodbye. Sebastian was already moving before the messenger finished speaking. Hours later, his horse thundered across snow-covered roads. Wind tore at his coat. Ice stung his face. None of it mattered. For the first time in 5 years, he was terrified. Not of losing power, not of losing status, of losing Evelyn. He reached the coastal road shortly before sunset. Then he saw it. A carriage ahead, moving toward the harbour. Sebastian's heart slammed against his ribs. "Evelyn!" The carriage continued moving. He urged the horse faster. "Evelyn!" Finally, the carriage stopped. The door opened, and there she was, standing beneath the fading winter light, looking at him with stunned eyes. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Evelyn whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Sebastian dismounted immediately. "I know. How did you find me?" "I looked." The answer sounded ridiculous even to him, because he had spent 5 years doing the exact opposite. Evelyn looked away first. "You were never supposed to read the letter." Sebastian laughed bitterly. "I think that was the problem." Her eyes met his again. He stepped closer. "For years you stood beside me while I looked everywhere except at you." The words hurt because they were true. Evelyn remained silent. Sebastian swallowed hard. "I thought you would always be there." A tear slid down her cheek. "And I got tired of waiting." His chest tightened painfully. "I know." Another silence followed. Then Sebastian did something he had never done before. Something pride had prevented for years. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Evelyn stared at him, shock visible across her face. Sebastian's voice broke. "I should have chosen you every day." Another step forward. "I should have seen you." Another. "I should have loved you the way you deserved." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. "Sebastian, for 5 years you gave me your heart." His own eyes burned now, and I was too blind to see it. The harbour wind howled around them. The world seemed to disappear. There was only Evelyn, only the woman he almost lost. Sebastian reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. "Please," he whispered. "Don't ask me to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd arrived one day too late." Evelyn stared at him for a long time. Then finally, slowly, she stepped closer. And for the first time since the day they married, Duke Sebastian Blackwood looked at his wife and saw the only person who had ever truly loved him, and this time he refused to look away.
What makes this story unforgettable isn't that Sebastian chased after Evelyn. It's that he finally understood something many people realize too late. Love isn't lost in a single moment. It's lost little by little when someone feels unseen, unheard, and unchosen. Evelyn spent 5 years loving a man who never truly looked at her, and Sebastian nearly lost the greatest thing in his life before he finally opened his eyes. Tell me honestly, if you were Evelyn, would you have forgiven Sebastian after everything she endured? Or would you have boarded that ship and never looked back? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves emotional royal romance stories. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable love stories to life.